Welcome classic rock fans to a very special ranking video. Today I'm going to look at the albums of Adam and the Ants. Well, 3 of them anyway. Number 3 is the Prince Charming album from 1981. This is where it gets all panto as far as I'm concerned. This was actually my Christmas present in 1981 if my memory serves me right. Adam Ant has always said that he regrets moving on from the ditching the Kings of the Wild Frontier look and sound, moving on to Prince Charming. I felt there was another album really in the can. We should have capitalised on that look and success for at least one more record. And I can't help but feel he's right. I think Stand and Deliver and Mohawk, which is on this album, would have suited that image or aesthetic of the band at that time, rather than the foppish Prince Charming. Trouser Press said of this album that Prince Charming is a letdown. Stand and Deliver offers more percussive entertainment a la Dog Eat Dog, and the title track is florid melodrama. But the much of the LP seems forced, ill-tempered and silly. It certainly did prompt another visit to the dressing up box. I shouldn't say that really, because Adam Ant put a lot of thought and work and employed a lot of people into designing the costumes and the looks that he particularly wanted. And the Prince Charming look was drawn from numerous sketches and historical documents dating from the 18th century. Ant Rap was absolutely dreadful, of course, even though we do get Lulu cavorting around as a damsel in distress in the video, where Adam Ant does his best Sir Galahad in shining knight regalia. Interestingly, Terry Lee Mile, the drummer, was asked which songs did he not like from his tenure in the band, and he said pretty much everything off Prince Charming. Not all reviews were bad, though. John Robb said he recognised the Prince Charming era as a brave and exotically strange collection of rhythmic pop perfection. I remember putting the needle on the vinyl for the first time and hearing Scorpios blare out, which was a far cry from what we were used to on the Kings of the Wild Frontier album, with all the brass, perhaps foreshadowing the direction that Adam Ant was going to move towards, sort of soul, R&B and Motown textures for the Friend and Foe album. And the title track, of course, featured a wonderful, lavish video featuring the late, great Diana Dawes. Although the song was a blatant rip-off of Rolf Harris's War Canoe from 1965, and I believe there was a kind of out-of-court settlement there. Nevertheless, it did spawn a beautifully lavish stage performance or stage show, the Prince Charming Review, which was actually filmed. They released it as a 1-hour concert on VHS, as was the thing in those days, to trim these concerts down to 1 hour, fit nicely on a VHS cassette. Beggars a question whether or not, I presume the whole thing was filmed, and if there's any footage left in the can, and whether we'd ever get a full-length restored version of this. I very much doubt it, because this takes time and it takes money, and it very much depends whether or not there's enough return in it, so probably not, unfortunately. Number 2 is Dirk Wears White Socks from 1979. This is an album that epitomises the kind of the demise, as punk was merging into new wave. It was kind of growing up a little bit, I suppose. This is more art rock than anything else. Although Adam Ant has been quite brazen about his desire to be a household name. He told the Scottish Herald, "I never wanted to stay a cult. For me, that's a polite word for loser, and being a cult doesn't pay the rent. I'd always wanted to be an established and household name." But as I said, 1979's Dirk Wears White Socks was a kind of a new wave record whose dour sleeve is very much at odds with the vibrant colours associated with the band later on. Malcolm McLaren also disliked the cover immensely and told Adam Ant, you're a good-looking guy with muscles, you should be putting yourself on the front cover. Maybe that's one little nugget of wisdom that Adam Ant gleaned from Malcolm McLaren's time managing the band, before he stole the Ants away from Adam, of course. I have to say, though, reading several books on Adam and the Ants, it seemed that breakup or that split was coming anyway. They seemed so tired and fed up with each other. It certainly spawned a kind of a race between them. Adam Ant was already exploring ideas of the Native American and that culture and its sort of heroic literature, and wanting to find music that perfectly suited his story and those narratives. And that Burundi drumming, of course, but at the same time Malcolm McLaren was kind of working with that sound for his new incarnation with the Adam and the Ants and Annabella Llewellyn, I think it was her name, I can't remember it now, before Bow Wow Wow. So there was a necessity to get the Kings of the Wild Frontier album out first. But we're talking about Dirk Wears White Socks. Dirk Wears White Socks, of course, was named after the actor Dirk Bogarde, and the album is seen as even an influence on the burgeoning goth scene as well. I think Adam Ant wanted to make a stylish album that had fingers in different generic pies for this record, almost as if he wasn't 100% sure of where he was going at the time. A lot of tracks that the Ants were performing live obviously didn't make it on this album. There's also a tendency for Adam and the Ants to employ a lot of sadomasochistic imagery and lyrical content regarding their music, which was all pushed aside for the more heroic narratives later on. There are elements of soul and funk on this record. Believe it or not, Adam Ant, in a 2014 interview for Classic Pop, said that album was me trying to make a Donna Summer record. All music has gone on to describe this album as a kind of a fusion. In fact, they say it's a fusion of glam, minimalistic post-punk and punk, with bizarre images and disturbing tales of alienation, sex and brutality. The album was actually recorded between the 12th and 24th of August 1979 at Sound Development Studios, and mixed between the 25th and 29th of August. But I think it's fair to say the band had seriously tired of each other. They were fatigued with the constant live touring and the lack of recognition. Do It Records has signed Adam and the Ants. Do It Records was actually set up by Robin Scott, who eventually himself decided he wanted to be a pop star. So he went off, renamed himself M, and he recorded and had a massive hit with the song Pop Music. I always find that the songs on this album feel a little bit limp sometimes. I mean, Car Trouble just splutters along, really. Car Trouble, of course, still features in Adam Ant's set to this day. It's a song that was inspired by his father's work as a chauffeur. Nevertheless, there are some real triumphs on this album as well, like Never Trust a Man with Egg on His Face and the wonderful Cleopatra. Animals and Men was influenced by the Italian Futurists. The lyrics seem to reference point 9 of the Futurist Manifesto published in 1909. Interesting, there was a lot of band resentment, I think, from the fact that Adam Ant would re-record his band's guitar parts himself later on. And of course that leaves us with the #1 album by Adam and the Ants, was this wonderful explosion of colour and vibrancy that happened in 1980. The way he just exploded onto our TV screens, that burst of colour and that vibrant Burundi drumming. And that white stripe, of course, I mean, how arresting was that? And that jacket worn by David Hemmings in the film Charge of the Light Brigade. Robert Christgau has described this record as a response to the British punk rock nihilism. The music, needless to say, is rock and roll, a clever pop-punk amalgam. Certainly I feel there's more influence here from people like Bowie and Mark Bolan than there's anything to do with punk. In fact, Adam Ant has been quite vocal in stating that Adam and the Ants became very anti-punk in some respects. It's about this time that Adam Ant met Peter Grant, and Peter Grant expressed an interest in managing the band. Gosh, I'm wondering how that would have paired out. Dog Eat Dog is one of the best songs on the album, a song inspired allegedly by the newly elected Margaret Thatcher, one of her phrases, although Marco argues it was actually him that brought the term to the table. And there was a specific sound, a heavily affected and layered sound to this album, which meant that a lot of it sounded a little bit thin sometimes when they performed it live. There was no way they could replicate it that faithfully. But Dog Eat Dog sound comes from Peroni's wail of percussive power chords, as well as the slowing down and layering of numerous vocal parts. Feed Me to the Lions is one of my favourites of this record, very rarely performed live. He did do the Kings of the Wild Frontier album in its entirety a few years ago, and he performed it then, but other than that I don't think it was. But it's a song that wouldn't be out of place on the Dirk Wears White Socks record, in my opinion. And fitting in with the very heroic theme of this record, we get Los Rancheros with its tributes to Ennio Morricone with that twangy guitar and referencing the films of Clint Eastwood. Jolly Roger is a bit of a camp affair, really, although it's a song that references Blackbeard, aka Edward Teach, who would terrify his victims by putting his beard in little bows and setting them on fire. No doubt that's where Adam got the idea of wearing bows in his hair. And Kings of the Wild Frontier is almost like a manifesto for this band, as well as Ant music, of course. But it ends with the human beings, that very eerie build-up, wonderful, wonderful number, which is almost hypnotic, and the track obviously pays tribute to a race of people that were effectively massacred in the 19th century, eradicated following the arrival of European settlers. When he performed this song live, Adamant would often end it with saying, "They are the human beings and we are the savages." One of the finest songs on this album is Ants Invasion. Ants Invasion was inspired by, I think, all those sci-fi B-movies from outer space. Wonderful song with Peroni's guitar motif that runs through it, with that menacing lyric and bridge section, which I absolutely adore. Interestingly, they performed for Whistle Test about this time, which was great, really, because the Whistle Test was always seen as a show for serious music. So it was quite cool that Adam and the Ants were on there. They performed live Ants Invasion and then Killer in the Home. You can go and check that out, it's on YouTube. So there you have it, that's how I would rank the Adam and the Ants albums. To what extent you agree with me, please leave your comments in the boxes below. Other than that, I just hope you're well, staying safe, but more importantly that you keep listening.